So welcome to Leading with Empathy and Allyship. Here we have deep, real conversations about how we can be more inclusive leaders in our workplaces and our communities. And I'm Melinda Briana Epler. I'm the founder and CEO of Change Catalyst, where we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, and events. This is a safe space to learn, to build empathy for each other, and to understand tangible actions we can all take to make a difference in each other's lives. So this is our final episode of season 3. And you have me for the whole time together. I'm going to talk about a topic we often get asked to cover, which is how to be an ally in the remote workplace. I'll share some best practices for allyship in the remote workplace, some practical tips I've learned following years of experience doing this work, with both all the way from, we work with small startups all the way through Fortune 500 companies in really building diversity, equity, inclusion, and particularly building empathy and allyship across leadership teams and across the company. So before we go further, I want to recognize that a year ago, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And I want to just take a moment of silence to honor his life and the lives of so many people who've been killed due to systemic racism and injustice. So let's just take a moment here to recognize their lives and this moment. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, and appreciate all the work you all are doing to create change. So on screen, just a few logistics. On screen, we have our ASL interpreters today, and they'll be on screen, taking turns on screen. Appreciate your partnership. This is with Interpreter Now. This is also being live captioned by Maggie at White Coat Captioning. So please, if you want to turn on captions, just go to the bottom of your screen and click on captioning, closed captions, and you will be able to adjust the settings there as well. And then thanks to our team, I don't do this alone. Juliet, Renzo, Araya, Emily, lots of folks behind the scenes working and doing things on this show and also in the Q&A. So they're there for you in the chat while I am speaking. And please share what's resonating for you in the chat, what you're thinking about as we're talking today. I'm going to ask you some questions too. And then of course we have a code of conduct at tcin.co/coc. Use the Q&A. I'll spend some time on questions if you have questions. So toward the end. So use the Q&A function if you have questions so that I can find them easily. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So y'all know who I am. I'm Melinda Briana Epler, the founder and CEO of Change Catalyst, and I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion speaker, writer, advocate. I work to create change. The tools I use to view my work are human systems design, storytelling, community building, and behavioral science. And I've been collecting and building upon these tools for a couple of decades. So I have a book coming out, which I've kind of mentioned a few times here, How to Be an Ally with McGraw-Hill. It comes out on, what I haven't said yet is the date, I don't think, September 14th. So I'm super excited about that. And you can also find my TED Talk about allyship at TED.com. And another resource for you is in episode 16, I talked about the stages of allyship and my own journey. Oh, you can't see the interpreter. Uh-oh. I think if you go to grid view, if you change your view to grid view, if you're not seeing the interpreter, that might make a difference. So Laura, let me know if that works. And maybe Renzo, if you could, side-by-side gallery, says Maria. Okay. Just try changing the settings a little bit so you can see. Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, so today I'm going to talk for a little bit here, show a few slides, and then I'm going to take the slides down and just kind of talk through some things that I have learned around the remote workplace. So first, I'm going to lay the foundations of allyship, just because some of you all have heard me talk about this before, but for those of you who are new, I just want to make sure we have some basic understanding before we go into some specifics. So as you all know, usually I start with what is your story? And because I've already done that in episode 16, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But I did want to say that, everybody comes to diversity, equity, inclusion work in different ways. We've seen that over the last 48 episodes that there's so many pathways to doing this work and to being an ally. And I have been working my whole life to create social and environmental change using my tools of systems design, human systems design, storytelling, community building, and behavior science. So about 8 years ago, I was an executive at an engineering firm in San Francisco. It was my dream job in a lot of ways, using all of the skills I've acquired over the years. I was head of marketing and culture, and I was also working with the nation's largest healthcare systems, working to reduce their energy and water use and improve their social impact, and was creating a lot of great change in that industry and in the world. I was proud of my work, and also it was not a good experience professionally. It was a deeply painful experience professionally, and I'm actually still working through the impact of that on my life and on my career. While there were bigger issues, most of what happened were little behaviors, little patterns, little barriers that kept me from doing my work well. They ate away at my confidence. They chipped away at my leadership capacity and my ability to innovate. Just being dismissed, not listened to, interrupted, talked over, my experience regularly questioned, belittlement, just to the point where, despite my track record of success in my life, in my workplace, in that workplace, I began to question my own expertise. That imposter syndrome started to set in. And little behaviors and patterns like this every day, they wear you down. Megan Smith, who's the former White House CTO, calls it death from 1,000 paper cuts. The little things every day, again and again. As the only woman on a leadership team of 19, the culture was just not created for me, and there wasn't space for me in that culture. It was mostly microaggressions. Microaggressions in the workplace are everyday slights, insults, negative verbal and nonverbal messages, whether they're intentional or not, often unintentional, but still equally harmful, right? They impede your ability to do your work well. They actually can make you feel unsafe, belittled, disrespected, unheard, othered, like you don't belong. And I realized that I wasn't failing. It took me a while. It took me a while to realize that it was the culture around me that was really failing me. That culture was just not set up to be inclusive. So how many of you all have experienced microaggressions at some point in your lives? I assume many of you have. Please feel free to raise your hand or just let me know. It can be really detrimental in the moment, and also in longer term as well. Microaggressions. We'll talk about this in been there, done that. I see Toki. Yes, Amy. We'll talk about this more in the coming episodes about how it really impacts you from a physical and biological standpoint, as well as emotional, cognitive, etc. It really does make a difference. And I realized I wasn't alone. Many people, when I give talks about this, come up to me afterwards and they say, "Thank you for giving me a name to what I've been feeling and experiencing." So many of us go through this alone, and we're not alone. Microaggressions affect underrepresented people of all backgrounds in the workplace. And when our colleagues don't show up and be our best selves, if we can't be our best selves, it affects us all. It has a real impact on happiness, productivity, profitability, and our collective capacity to innovate. And we'll talk more about the business case for empathy and allyship in an upcoming episode, actually. I want to share with you all some of the things that we have learned around the business case too. And the case for doing this work. Yeah, Amy, why are they so hard to get over? I know. It's because it's trauma. It's trauma, especially when it's repeatedly happening over and over and over and over again. So when I talk about allyship and the need to be there for each other, I'm thinking about all the people who are underrepresented in the workplace, across gender, race, ethnicity, LGBTQIA, disability, religion, people who are veterans, and in tech, anybody over 35. And in most industries, there is age discrimination as well, and others. There's lots of other identities that face underrepresentation in the workplace and barriers in the workplace. And of course, keep in mind intersectionality. Many people hold more than one of these identities, right? And somebody can actually hold all of these identities. So that means there may be some compounded barriers in opportunity to live, to love, to lead, to thrive. Just a quick reminder about why people are underrepresented. Historical privilege and oppression, that 500 years of colonization here in the United States and in many parts of the world, most parts of the world, enslavement, persecution, and the intergenerational impact that continues to have an impact on our health and our wealth. That is an intergenerational impact of years and years of systemic inequities in education, police and criminal justice systems, and housing and workplaces. And then personal biases that we learn biases from our family, our friends, our schools, our teachers, our media, and even in the workplace, and that can have a real impact. And then cultural marginalization as well, popular culture, workplace culture, the stories we tell, who tells those stories, and then that translates into the workplace. So it translates in, education. Translates into the access that we have to networks, the access we have to opportunities. Historical privilege and oppression, of course, leads to discrimination as well. Systemic inequities lead to hiring, pay, and promotion inequity, just as an example, several inequities in the workplace. Personal biases lead to impact in hiring and promotions, project assignments, meetings. And then cultural marginalization leads to harassment, bullying, avoiding people because we don't know what to say, what to do, tokenism, othering, of course, microaggressions, and then the bigger macroaggressions. And so allyship is recognizing all of that. It's recognizing there's an imbalance in opportunity. And then it's using your power and your privilege to change it. It's really using your influence to make a change, to make a shift. There's so many levels of what you can do, but it starts with really seeing and understanding the person next to us, and then recognizing perhaps there might be somebody who's missing who should be standing next to us. And then first doing the work to learn what they're going through and then help them succeed and thrive with us. So it's learning, showing empathy, and taking action. It's not enough just to learn. It's empathy in action. Rather than being a bystander, allies take action. And it benefits us all. So again, we'll talk more about the benefits of this, but we've just done a study on allyship where I'm super excited. We'll be releasing it in a couple of months. And our data shows that when we work together to develop a culture of allyship, people are safer. They're more engaged, they're happier, they feel a greater sense of belonging. McKinsey, of course, shows diverse and inclusive teams are more innovative, more productive, more profitable. There's a lot of studies that show that it leads to greater happiness overall, so much. And of course, it's the right thing to do. And a reminder that it takes all of us from every background, all of us. I need allies in my life as a woman. I work every day to use the privilege I have to be an ally for people who have less privilege than I do. Women of color, women with disabilities, people across the spectrum of underrepresentation. My privilege includes being a white cisgendered woman in the United States, among other things, many other things that give me more privilege than other people. And all of us can be better allies. And we all have the ability to really be there for each other and show empathy and take action on each other's behalf. I also have talked a little bit about this, and we talked about this with Vanessa Roanhorse way back in season 1. I have mutual allies. I'm an ally for people who are also allies for me at different points in our lives, and we kind of show up for each other when we need it. Also, I'm an ally for people who don't even know I'm an ally for them, because sometimes this work requires stepping in, advocating, not asking for credit, but advocating for people when they aren't even in the room. I also change systems. All of that is allyship, and all of that is also being a good human, I would say. And so, just a couple of examples that this is from our research, actually. An ally there's so many things you can do as an ally. Most of the time, they're small acts that can make a big difference. We've heard a lot of different stories over the last 3 seasons. Here's a few examples from our directly from what people said about how allies have made a difference in their lives. Hire me and give me a chance. Ensure I'm recognized for my work. Mentor me on how to become a leader. Put in a good word for me. Stand up for fair pay. Look out for my well-being. Support my ideas. Give me confidence. All of these things make a difference in people's lives in ways that we will never fully understand and see. And so I won't go too much into this. This is all in my book, actually. And we'll go deeper into some of this over the coming episodes, actually. So, but step 1 is to learn, to unlearn, to relearn. You all are here learning, unlearning, and relearning. We've talked a lot about history, and being that it's been written from kind of one point of view, and often history in our history books can write out whole cultures and whole ideas and whole systems, and sometimes whole genders as well. So there is much to learn. There's much to unlearn, because some of what we learned was incorrect, and then relearning. But allies also don't get stuck in that learning. Again, it's empathy in action, right? So doing no harm is you have to work to do no harm. That starts with recognizing that we have biases that we've learned from families, from friends, from media, from film, television, and we work to understand those biases and correct them. The second part of doing no harm is recognizing and overcoming microaggressions, so that we don't do them. There's some of the most harmful things that can happen in the workplace, and they're just little. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing them. So really working on what microaggressions are, learning what microaggressions are and recognizing those, and then overcoming them, finding ways to make sure we're not doing them. Advocate for people, whether or not they're in the room. How are you advocating for your colleagues, for them to have jobs, speaking opportunities, leadership opportunities, pay and promotion equity, even boosting their confidence and trust, and trusting them to lead, giving them those opportunities. Step 5, stand up for what's right. Interrupt the biases, interrupt the microaggressions, say something and do something when you see something as harmful. Step 6, lead the change. How are you showing up as a leader? Work on your inclusive leadership skills, on doing your work in a way that is more inclusive, and accessible, and equitable. And then model allyship as well as a part of that, leading the change. You can show people what allyship looks like. And then step 7 is to transform your organization, your industry, our society. And there's so many ways that we have centuries of inequity, injustice in our workplaces and in our industries. So there's a lot to do here, and just take one step at a time in society. Also, how are you raising anti-racist children? We talked about that in one of our past episodes. Make sure you're voting, you're doing your jury duty, because as the statistics show that Black, Latinx, and Indigenous people are more often arrested. And when they are arrested, they are more often convicted, and they're more often given harsher sentences. So doing our jury duty is a form of allyship, and really making sure that that is fair and just. And then in your life, just when you see something, say something, do something. Okay. So, this is the work of recognizing both our commonalities and valuing difference, valuing our differences. When we first meet people, even when we've been working with them for a long time, even when we know them for a long time, we usually look for what we have in common. But the other part of being an ally is valuing and appreciating what we don't have in common, the ways we're uniquely different. And this means really listening with empathy and building understanding. So the best allies that I know work internally to know themselves, and then they listen and learn and act with empathy. So breaking down what empathy is, because we don't often talk about this. So empathy is two things. This is adapted from Teresa Weissman, who's a nurse. Her work is widely used to develop empathy in both physicians and nurses in the medical industry. So two parts to empathy: insight and engagement. Engagement is the part we often forget about. So insight is seeing their world. For this, you have to be present. You have to take their perspective, be open and take in their perspective, and see the world as they see it, not as how we see it. It might be different from our own. Perception is different and unique, fitting our unique experiences. And then listen to and understand those unique feelings and experiences that they have. In the remote workplace, actually, this might be listening to what they're saying but it also might be tuning into what they're not saying. Other facial cues, indications about what is happening in somebody's world. And we engage. The second part of leading with empathy is engaging, appreciating people without judgment, without minimizing their experience, trust their experience, and be curious about that experience. And then communicate that understanding. I see you, I hear you, I care about what you shared. Empathy is different from pity or sympathy. It's really building a relationship. It's we learn that what somebody is experiencing, and then we access our own feelings to connect with them, and then we act in solidarity. It's a muscle. You have to practice it, and it can be learned. Lots of studies show that empathy can be learned. I definitely didn't grow up with as much empathy as I have now. I've really worked hard on it. So practice building that muscle. Okay, so in 2020, the world changed. And if ever there was a time for empathy, for allyship, it's now. It's over the last year, right? There's so much going on, and we're all going through something different. So those of you, actually, would you all just kind of share some of the things that are going on in people's lives right now? Some of the things you know are going on in people's lives right now. Just share something that is coming up in your workplace. Now, I'll start, but please do share. I appreciate the folks that have shared so far. One is, of course, illness. Almost everybody who knows somebody who's been severely ill or who's passed away from COVID. And that collective grief is real, and it's important to recognize. And we're going to need to do some things in our workplaces to really nurture ourselves over the next few years to really get over that collective grief and burnout. Mental health challenges, as Erica, mental health challenges, wellness. Yeah, absolutely. And y'all you're just, some of these comments are just coming to panelists. If you click panelists and attendees, then everybody can see them. Financial stress. Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be also some anxiety and division around returning to work. Something that's really important to kind of keep in mind, anxiety around coming to work too soon. There's, so many of us have been pretty isolated, and so big groups, I know I'm going to have a hard time with big groups for a while. There's a disproportionate impact of COVID across the world, and it impacts people. It has impacted people differently. And some families have experienced job losses more than others. It's disproportionately affected women, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous folks. And then, of course, racism and injustice for Black and Indigenous people, and anti-Asian violence is coming up. Virtual burnout, Erica says, yeah, absolutely. So much anxiety to return to work, definitely. Yeah, and also, I'm noticing that there's some people are comfortable on not taking off their masks, and some people are not, and that's we're going to have to kind of grapple with that as some people go back to work in the physical space. And then the other piece of it is, just recognizing that maybe we don't all need to go back to the physical workspace. Normal, some people are talking about returning to normal, and normal didn't work for everyone, right? So we may need to redefine normal too, and allow a hybrid workplace where people who are caretakers, parents and caretakers of family members, people who are of other family members, and of people that have been commuting long hours, that's not good for your health and well-being, right? So, and then so many people with disabilities were fighting for so long to work remotely, and finally we have this ability to do it, and we've figured out a way. So maybe we need to redefine normal for everybody. Yeah, so. And I also want to say, don't confuse the stuff with politics, right? Don't confuse the stuff that people are going through with politics. And this is life. Please don't ban conversations about it, but you have to encourage and recognize people's unique experiences here. Understand it, support each other through it. Now is not the time to ignore it. We recognize it, acknowledge, support your colleagues. It's what makes us feel like we belong right now. And it takes work to do that. But it's important, and the alternative is not good, where trauma, lack of productivity, unnecessary stress is not good for anybody. So so work on this. Recognize interconnectedness, says Erica. Yeah, absolutely. Toki says, be kind, check in, listen. Absolutely. And the other piece of this is recognize what you're going through too. Michael Thomas said, allies do the work, right? We need to do our own work to heal and to build resilience, self-care, said Kevin. Yeah, absolutely. Be kind to yourself so that you can show up for other people. And also know that when we're stressed, when we're burned out, studies show that empathy can wane, right? We have to actually work harder when we're stressed out and burned out, to build that empathy, to use that empathy muscle for ourselves and for each other. Yeah. So what can we do as allies? Recognize and acknowledge, that's a piece of it. Right. And part of it is also learning to recognize subtle clues of exclusion. Little behavioral shifts that people may have, whether that's just in facial expressions. It might be distancing. It might be lower engagement. Lots of little cues in the remote workplace, because we're not seeing people in their full bodies, right? So we have to be a little more perceptive sometimes. In video, also some other things to think about in terms of allyship in the workplace is, in video, our body language and our facial expressions are heightened. We're seeing a lot of this square right here in front of our faces, right? For those of us who are on video. And consequently, because it's all you can see, it's really important to mind your microaggressions, and also consider some micro affirmations, some nodding, some recognition of what somebody is saying in your body language, in your expressions. So how are you showing up for somebody on the other side of that screen in a way that you might not have to so much in the remote workplace? There's little subtle cues that make a big difference. Maybe that you're coming from another meeting where it was difficult, or you're coming from life and it was really difficult, and you might just need to take a moment to reset before coming into a new meeting, so you can really bring the energy you want to bring into that moment, and really be there for somebody, for your team. Also, have definitely learned on our team that tone doesn't come through chat. And so we really have to work hard to check in with each other, to just describe a little bit more with our words. Sometimes last year around this time, one of my team member was being a little silent in Slack, which is the platform we use for communication. And I finally just checked in and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they said, "I'm sorry I disappointed you." And I don't remember a time when it was not in my intention at all. There was nowhere on my mind that I was disappointed. It was, I was working, I think, to achieve a solution to a problem at the time. And so sometimes you have to check in with people and also check to be sure that that there's something actually there, that there is a there there. There might not be a there there. And so that communication is so important. You might have to describe context, remind each other the tone doesn't come through the chat, and then just don't assume tone. And this, across cultures is really important as well. If you're working in a global workplace, tone, and even tone in your writing, tone in video also is kind of heightened. So just be aware of that cross-cultural difference in communication too, and over communicate and make sure that you're not assuming tone. I also have learned, and I think a lot of us have learned, that people say things via chat that they wouldn't say in person. Happens in my keynote sessions sometimes, and where there's no way that somebody would say that to me in person, but they say it in chat. And so, and a lot of companies that we work with, the most microaggressions happen in the backroom chats. So have a code of conduct that you can easily reference and point to violations of it. If you have a large company, really encourage your company to have a person that's dedicated to ensuring the safety and inclusion on those internal platforms. Report, call people in when you see microaggressions, intervene when you see something that's harmful, all the same stuff that you would normally do as an ally and do in the workplace, in the remote workplace as well. Over communication again, and providing clarity around whether that is your timelines, and really providing clarity around their goals, also checking in on what you've accomplished and those timelines. Sometimes timelines are a little bit different in the remote workplace, especially right now, given what everybody is going through. So communicate also when you'll be offline. We've found that is really important as well, so people know what to expect. Inclusive video conferencing, also super important. You make sure that you're providing accessibility, and that somebody doesn't have to ask for accessibility. So ASL interpreters, captioning, and then also describe slides and provide PDFs for anybody who's blind or low vision or on the phone, so they can follow along. Work harder to collaborate is another big one, right? We need to work on bridging isolation. So use collaborative documents, innovation platforms, find other ways to get people involved and thinking in new ways. Sometimes even just having virtual co-working sessions, via video, to hold each other accountable, to ask questions when you're needed. If you're an extrovert, find those ways to still have those moments. And then, recreating the water cooler effect, and finding ways to get to know each other, schedule time on each other's calendars. And we can't have so many of these asynchronous moments. So find moments in somebody's day and just check in with them. Building that empathy is so important. And I think, just one more thing here, I think that I want to mention is that so many people are, come on board for the first time in a company now, and they're remote, and navigating that remote workplace can be more difficult. Navigating the culture, navigating the systems, navigating the processes. So be there for somebody and help them navigate through the first few weeks and check in with them. Just check in with them over many weeks, over many months, to make sure they're feeling welcome and finding their place on the team, and they're getting what they need. And the last thing is, advocacy, mentorship, sponsorship, all of this can take more effort in the remote workplace. So you have to schedule, again, you have to really work to a little bit harder to put it on the calendar. But then a lot of it is the same as well. There's no excuse for, just because we're remote, we still have to be good allies, and so get creative. We all know that inequity still exists. So there's a lot that we can do in the remote workplace to make sure that our workplaces are more equitable, more inclusive. And I want to just pause and see if you all have other things that you're doing and you're thinking about in your workplaces as well. And I'm going to take the slides down. I have a few more things that I want to talk about after this, but I'm going to take the slides down so you can see us in full picture here. Yeah, what else have you all done? Engage with ERGs. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, well, I'm sure you all have done other things. So keep thinking about it, standing up in an individual situations, coaching colleagues. Yeah, awesome, Madeline. Yeah. Reaching out to people. Yeah, just reaching out, checking in. Amy and Denise, both check-ins. Yeah, absolutely. Little things that we can do can make a big difference in somebody's day. Keep adding. I would love to see more of what you're doing, and I'm just going to kind of talk specifically about for managers. And if you all have Q&A, I will jump to Q&A in a little bit. So if you have questions, please do just use the Q&A window so I can find them easily. And yeah. Okay, so for managers and for leaders, some of the things you can think about as well. And these are really things that anybody who's leading a team, anybody who's leading a meeting even can also really focus on. So the first is to just actively address what's happening in people's lives. You can't ignore it. Build that kind of psychological safety in your meetings and on your teams where you are sharing what's happening in your lives and you're learning from each other what's happening in our lives, because that can make a big difference. Whether that is, in your stand-ups, in your team meetings, having a time where you just all check in with each other, say what you're feeling, what you're thinking about that's not related to work. That builds empathy for each other. That really makes a big difference. And just find that psychological safety, build that psychological safety so that people can do that and feel safe. Normalize asking for real how people are, not just and so when you ask how somebody is, don't let fine be the answer. How are you really feeling? I really want to know, and then listen. And then I also think, in this time where this is a difficult time for a lot of people, is how can we bring joy to our teams? How can we find joy as a team? What are some little moments of joy that we can find for all of us to really tap into that and make sure that, we're enjoying, we're having some happiness in our lives. And, if anybody has any thoughts or suggestions about that, would love to hear them. Gino says, ensure some quarterly fun get-togethers. Yeah. I know other teams have, they will spend every other week. They'll have it optional time for a game or some kind of fun interactive design session, something like that, where people get to kind of think out of the box. Virtual happy hour. Yeah, Kevin. Great. Those random acts of kindness. Yeah, 100%. And Gino, I did a cookie bake instruction session during the winter holidays. Yeah, I have a team that also built gingerbread together. You know, little things like that can, another team that built terrariums together. They got this package in the mail, and then they all kind of worked on those together. So little fun activities. Engagement also, you know, part of that is engagement, and also, you know, have those, you know, you can find volunteer opportunities to work together. Other teams I've seen are mixing up teams across different projects from time to time, so other people get to know each other, especially in the remote setting. You might end up working with the same team consistently, but you know, how can you break that up a little bit and allow people to form on other teams as well to really get to know each other across the organization a bit more. Something else to think about is feedback. Feedback is so important in people's careers, and it often gets lost in general, and then especially in the workplace. So it's crucial to career growth. It's also crucial to our happiness and our sense of accomplishment. So schedule informal and formal check-ins. Since we can't, you know, ask each other to lunch or coffee, run into each other in the halls or stop by each other's offices, in the remote setting, you just schedule those little coffee moments. Schedule those little informal check-ins that to check in on projects, to check in on progress, to give somebody little pieces of feedback that can make a difference in their performance for you moving forward. Denise says, always end every conversation with what I can do better, and or what can I do for you to make your work experience better. Yeah, absolutely. Open yourself up to that feedback as well, so you're also progressing in your own career and growth, and you're learning how to be there for your team. Absolutely. Mentorship, I mentioned before, it can fall by the wayside in a remote setting. So really make sure that you're still there for people. You're still there for your team. And then formal check-ins. Berlant says, virtual talent show allows you to see your colleagues in a different light or spotlight, providing more opportunities for connection, respect, and appreciation outside of work-related things. Interesting. I haven't heard that one. That's cool. And then the formal check-ins. You know, we work with some companies where for 2 months leading up to performance reviews, people are stressed, like really stressed in the workplace. How can you reduce that stress? You know, that stress doesn't change. It maybe even gets worse in the virtual space, in the remote workspace. How do you reduce that stress? It's not good for anyone. So find ways to reduce that. And then, you know, little things around perks, like in the tech industry, there's so many different perks people have in the physical workspace, right? So think about what perks you can provide in the virtual workspace, in the remote workplace. You know, whether that is, technology, of course, and giving people what they need to develop a workplace that is ergonomically set up well, so that they don't have physical stress on their bodies. And also, what makes an office a fun place to be? You know, how does the home office also become fun? Whether that's decor, that's plants. You know, some companies have you know, sent a plant along with the welcome package of technology and office furniture. Home lunches. I've seen a few companies where they have either kind of happy hours after work or toward the end of work, or they have lunches together where the company will actually give them a voucher to go buy lunch somewhere and then they all come together, and things like that. And you can't do that in the physical workspace, right? For many people. So figure out how to do it in the remote workplace. And then, and also, yeah, y'all, I'm sure have some other examples of that kind of thing too. So, hiring, just, use this opportunity to find more diverse team members. We have this unique opportunity to open up our networks beyond the headquarters of the office. And then the other piece of all of this to kind of keep in mind in hiring is really working with your team around how to handle the gaps in resumes that a lot of people, particularly women, will have over the next couple of years as they stepped out of the workplace and to become caregivers full time. Somebody had to. So how do you handle those gaps in resumes? Make sure you're working with your team on that, so that they're not excluding amazing people from coming to work with you. And then, we have one Q&A. If anybody else has more questions, so many great conversations happening here as well in the chat. But if you have specific questions, put them in the Q&A and I'll jump to those in a moment. The hybrid workplace, and Madeline, what measures need to be adapted to hybrid? Yeah, I was going to go there next, so we're on the same page. We have this ability to do remote work now, and we've kind of most companies have figured it out to a certain degree. And as I said before, the old normal wasn't working, so redefine normal. And make sure that you're including everybody in that. So yeah, I think we're still kind of all trying to figure out exactly what that hybrid workplace looks like. But equity, making sure that you're having a framework of equity around this, and the perks that people have in the remote workplace are there, that you're in presentations, you're acknowledging and recognizing equally that people who are working remotely, meeting structures, often we will forget about the people who aren't physically in the room with us. And it's really important to recognize and include folks that aren't in the room physically with us, but are in the remote space. If anybody else has thoughts around that, I think that is kind of the next step in all of this. Is a lot of workplaces are going to have to think through is what does that redefined normal look like in the hybrid workplace? Yeah. So Tanya asks, how do you initiate those difficult conversations, especially with a group that is unwilling to acknowledge their microaggressions caused? That's a big question. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the difficult conversations around microaggressions, or if you're talking about the difficult conversations around in racial injustice, anti-Asian hate, the things that are happening now. So I'll answer that first question and say that you do need to kind of build a psychologically safe space. So build some ground rules before you when at the top of having a conversation like this. The ground rules need to be very clear. What's okay, what's not okay, that this is a safe space, that harm will not be tolerated, that being open to new ideas, all of these things are so important. And you may want to bring in a facilitator the first time to really learn from them how they do it, because there's some really great facilitators that have been doing this work for a long time. So you may want to learn from them the first time if you've never done this before. Sharing stories. Tito talked earlier this season about her work to have those conversations internally in the workplace, and it was really storytelling. having a space for people to share their own stories and really learn from each other. So that can make a big difference. With a group that's unwilling to acknowledge their microaggressions, it's not a whole group usually that's denying that, right? So it's one or two people. So I just want to kind of disentangle that a little bit. That generally it's not a whole group, and so acknowledging microaggressions, I think, starts with you often and kind of modeling that. And so I will say that modeling allyship, modeling acknowledgement of harm that you have caused can make a big difference. Sometimes you can't do this in a group setting. So for the folks that are just not there, you kind of do have to do this one-on-one. You can't do it in a group setting because you need to create that safe space. And if people are going to be harmed in that space, don't do it. So have one-on-one conversations. You can also do some inclusive leadership coaching with some folks. I have done that with some executives who just needed to really understand what microaggressions were and tap into their motivations for changing it, and then doing the work to change it. And they needed the space to practice it without creating harm in others too. So it's not easy, and it takes time, and building that culture where people feel safe is essential, and it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, good question, Tanya. Yeah, and I was referring to difficult conversations to address the pain caused by the group. I see. Yeah. Yeah, I would bring in a facilitator if you can't, in that case, so you can participate as well, and so everybody can participate, and somebody that's really done this work before. Yeah, well, great. Just the key to all of this work, and the key, one of our big values and kind of what we consistently come back to at Change Catalyst is to focus on solutions. It's really looking deep into what those solutions are. You don't have all the answers, and sometimes it's talking it out together, and really working together to find a solution that works. So thank you all for being here and sharing so many of your thoughts here. Really appreciate that, and appreciate all the work that you all do. It's not easy always. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is easy. And take care of yourselves. And I want to say a few words about next season. So next season, we have a special summer season, season 4. We have a lot of requests for some specific topics. And I have my coming out in not too long. And so I also want to share some things that I have learned there. And I'm just going to share my screen for a moment so you can see what's coming up. Perhaps. Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk about 4 things, and these are all requests that we've had over and over again for topics to talk about here and in our trainings as well. So the first one on June 8th, so not next week, the week after, is why empathy and allyship matter in the workplace, and we'll talk about how allyship is connected to some diversity, equity, inclusion outcomes, what people want from allies, and also the business case. So you all can use that in your advocacy internally to do more of this work. And then understanding and correcting our biases, learning about biases, lots of different types of biases that might come up in the workplace in particular, and ways that you can interrupt and correct them. And then 2 episodes around recognizing and overcoming microaggressions. The first part will be about verbal microaggressions, the different types, and how to overcome them ourselves so we don't create harm with our words. And the second part will include some other types of microaggressions, nonverbal, environmental, and then the actions that we can take to intervene. Some specific actions we can take to intervene when we see or experience microaggressions. So every other week in June and July. And then we're also taking August off, just so you all know. Team needs a bit of a break. I need a little bit of a break. We all do. And so we're going to take a little bit of a break there in August. And these are the most requested topics for our show. So hopefully they will be valuable to you and valuable as you bring them back to the workplace. And I'm excited to see you all in a couple of weeks. And last, what will you do differently? Question for you all. What will you do differently? What action will you take after hearing all the things we talked about today? What action will you take? And you can share here if you all are still here. And I would appreciate that, knowing that. We are going to take a break next week. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Keep listening. Awesome. Erica, thank you. And please share this with your colleagues. You can find previous podcast episodes at changecatalyst.co/allyship series. And also, please find this on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube and just like it or subscribe to it, so we continue to grow our audience. And thank you, Gino. Thanks for the space. Got to jump. Thank you all for the comments coming in. I appreciate you. Be more mindful of my remote staff and also keep listening, learning, and engaging. Thank you, D-Nice. And thank you, Erica. Take care of me. Yeah, exactly. That's why we're taking a little bit of a break. All right, appreciate you all. Stay well, stay safe, and keep doing this work of empathy and allyship. Bye.